The diaphanous dichotomy of transatlantic peregrinatory conundrums betwixt the verdant pastures of the United States and the cobblestone-laden boulevards of Europe has engendered a veritable symphony of cognitive consternation amongst the punditocratic class.
Why you think the EU immigration situation is different from the United States? This is vibes based. I'm going to be honest. This is vibes based, but there are things that I see from like large. I can't think of a nice way to say Muslim. Just large Muslim things that kind of scare me. Like the Charlie Hebdo is kind of spooky. I think that type of stuff is spooky. I'm not saying it's like it's unmanageable or completely out of control, but when I see that type of behavior happen, and then I see like politicians, it feels like kind of like run a little bit of cover for it. That type of stuff is weird. I don't think that's good. But I also think the more important part, I should have brought this up first. The more important part is that it feels like the work requirements in European countries are a lot stricter than the work requirements in USA. So like the only things I've ever heard, I've only ever kind of even barely looked. I would never even say I've deep dove into this, but like for Sweden and Germany, you get these immigrants that will come in, and because they can't speak the language or whatever, they're in the country for like a year or more and they're not working. Meanwhile, in the US, like you have like hundreds of thousands of immigrants that are accounted for and everything in your country, and they're not working, and they're not allowed to work. They're not even allowed to get jobs. Meanwhile, in the United States, our illegal immigrants are all working. Our illegal ones are all working. Like even the ones that are not supposed to be here have jobs. And I don't know, that just seems. Also, I do think that this is a thing that's very frustrating to me when conservatives talk about illegal immigrants to the U.S. They want to come here and destroy our country. And then no, they want to come here and work. We got jobs for these people. Why would you assume the only reason somebody wants to come to the United States is to country over? We have a great country with a lot of opportunity. You say this all the time, right? Why would it be any different for an illegal immigrant coming here? So people come over here, I think, generally to choose to work. Conservatives will derisively refer to these people as economic migrants or whatever, or economic refugees or whatever. But I don't care if you want to come here and work. I think that's based. That's awesome. We should do that. And we know it's awesome, even if you can't verbalize it. Intuitively, you know it's awesome, because that's why Donald Trump talks about making Canada and Mexico the 51st states, because we want those economies. Hell yeah, you got a ton of workers here. We'll put these to work, of course. But in Europe, I think it is possible that people might be choosing to migrate for like welfare state related reasons. Again, regardless of what retarded Americans think, nobody has ever illegally immigrated to the United States in the hopes of taking advantage of our wonderful welfare state. It just doesn't happen in the US. But I don't know if I would say the same for for Germany or Sweden, because I think that the welfare states are a lot more generous in those countries, and they probably should be a little bit more, clamped down on. Your take on this? Oh, you're a retard in chat. Sorry. USA conservatives look from the EU perspective, and the EU looks from the USA perspective. I mean, people just like pick and grab whatever arguments they want to make whatever argument they want. Do you think that Suits has some things that are true in real life in some situations? Probably not that much, no? Okay. Hey, Destiny, what about banning high-skilled labor, since those should be for citizens? I mean, our high-skilled citizen population is already deployed. We don't have any more left to hire. Have you seen any evidence of that? From what I have seen in the UK, I thought most immigrants do work. They generally have higher earnings. I think in the UK, I think immigrants generally do work, yes. That's why... I think that's why in the UK, even after you guys Brexited... I think that the migration dramatically increased, and I thought I'm way outside of my area of coverage. I haven't read any huge literature on this or big articles on this, but the requirements that you guys have in the UK for labor is really big, and you need people to come in and fill these jobs out. But yeah, so people are simultaneously really ass panicking. It's well, hold on, I thought we Brexited to get rid of the immigrants, but it's okay, well, also our economy is literally falling apart. So yeah. Have you changed your opinion on Lauren Southern's generation identity boat memes to stop migrants from getting to Europe? No, because that was always it's not coming from the right place, and it's not the right type of analysis, and it's not the right type of conclusion that we have to stop them because they're culturally dissimilar or whatever other, and brown, usually because of brown. I think was a lot of for those people, yeah. Should American companies prioritize hiring native-born workers before hiring foreigners? That's literally the requirement for H-1B visas. You're supposed to show the government you've made an effort to hire locally first. Isn't there a problem with youth undergraduate employment at the moment? I'm not aware of there being any employment problems across any sector of people in the U.S. right now. You can link me stuff if you want, though. Why is wanting to stop them because they're culturally dissimilar invalid? Because I feel like culturally dissimilar is always just a dog whistle for they're brown. I think that there are probably cultural arguments you can make. Like, I don't know how you would pull this, but like if a guy thinks, for instance, I don't know if you would do a test, but like if a guy thinks you should be able to rape your wife, like this is probably not the type of person you would want in your country. I think I would be okay polling around that. But it feels like when people say like cultural similarity, they're usually just trying to say they're not white enough or they're not. That feels like what it is like every time, I guess. I don't know.
But one must proceed with the dialectical scalpels of apperceptive scrutiny, lest we descend into the abysmal chasms of jejune platitudinal recitations, uninformed by the axiomatic realpolitik of our era. Contemplate, if you will, the obfuscatory nature of mass migratory phenomena, wherein the currents of anthropological flux manifest divergent iterations upon the respective socio-political tableaus of the United States and the European Union. What, pray tell, precipitates this contrapuntal variance? To ascribe such discrepant dispositions to mere vibological prognostication is to engage in the most jejune of intellectual enterprises. Nay, we must unsheathe the double-edged blade of empirical dialectics, wielding it with the precision of a sophist well-versed in the peripatetic traditions of Aristotelian rigor. Behold, in the verdant expanses of the United States, the sine qua non of the immigrant ethos is an insatiable appetite for laborious exertion. The indomitable sinews of the itinerant plebeian forge the infrastructural sinecures upon which the monolithic American economic engine ceaselessly churns. Indeed, even the most surreptitious of interlopers, bereft of juridico-bureaucratic sanction, find themselves inexorably ensconced in the mechanistic gears of industrial productivity. Here, the ideological parapets of nativist consternation crumble beneath the inexorable weight of economic necessity. The famished maw of capitalism, ravenous and unyielding, devours all who seek succor within its dominion, irrespective of their documental veracity. But when we traverse the vast and unending waters of the Atlantic and set our gaze upon the European continent, we encounter an altogether disparate symphony of socio-cultural exigencies. The welfare state, that august and magnanimous leviathan, casts an omnipresent umbra over the migratory calculus. Herein, the loci of discourse transmute from industrious assimilation to the potentiality of parasitical subsistence. The specter of non-integrative stagnation looms large, as bureaucratic machinations entwine migrants in a gordian not of regulatory impediments that forestall immediate workforce assimilation. Verily, we must apprehend the ontological substratum of European migratory apprehensions, the specter of cultural discord. Whereas the American immigrant is assimilated into the economic engine post-haste, his European counterpart oft finds himself ensnared within the insidious tentacles of societal circumspection, wherein the preeminence of cultural homogeneity is upheld as an inviolable shibboleth. It is here, within this theater of socio-political dramaturgy, that we encounter the disquietude of the Occidental proletariat, who perceives within the flux of immigration an existential perturbation of their immutable cultural milieu. Lo, does not the specter of Charlie Hebdo haunt the cognitions of the Eurocentric conservative? Does he not tremble at the thought of socio-religious incursions into his secular sanctum? But in the American schema, such trepidations dissipate into the ether, overshadowed as they are by the unyielding imperatives of economic pragmatism. Forsooth, the North American ethos, predicated upon the mercantile imperatives of hyper-capitalist exigencies, renders such cultural dissonances tertiary at best. Yet, the discourse surrounding European immigration is further complicated by the looming specter of the welfare state, which engenders the pernicious perception of migratory opportunism. The European layman, ensconced in the orthodoxy of the social democratic covenant, gazes upon the newly arrived denizen not as a compatriot of toil, but as a supplicant of state largesse. The conflation of economic migration with welfare parasitism engenders a cauldron of discord, wherein the threads of nativist apprehension intertwine with the pragmatic exigencies of state solvency. But alas, let us not be so blinded by the dazzle of economic pragmatism that we neglect the subterranean currents of ideological interpellation. The American conservative, in his myopic proclivity for rhetorical bombast, decries the specter of migration not as an economic malaise, but as a politico-cultural insurrection. But herein lies the paradox. Does he not, in the same breath, extol the virtues of a robust labor force? Does he not, in his esoteric contemplations, yearn for the very industriousness that the immigrant provides? Thus, we encounter a paradox most profound, wherein the fulminations of nativist recalcitrants stand in diametric opposition to the economic imperatives they so vehemently champion. The European conservative, on the other hand, navigates an ideological landscape wherein the fulcrum of discourse is not mere economic participation but cultural symbiosis. Here, the conflagration of migratory discourse is stoked not by the embers of economic exigency, but by the conflation of ethno-religious identities with civilizational continuity. To the Eurocentric interlocutor, the immigrant is not merely a laboring entity, but a harbinger of cultural metamorphosis, an agent of irrevocable transfiguration. To render unto conclusion this peripatetic dissertation, one must acknowledge the fundamental bifurcation of transatlantic migratory paradigms. In the United States, the migrant is an indispensable cog in the capitalist machinery, assimilated through the crucible of economic participation. In Europe, by contrast, the migrant is oft perceived through the prism of cultural existentialism, wherein the apprehensions of nativist sentiment supersede the cold calculus of economic integration. Thus, we discern within this grand tableau a dialectical synthesis, a transatlantic divergence rooted not in mere policy, but in the foundational axioms of sociopolitical ontology itself.